Families mean something to all of us, and we often quarrel or fight with our family members. To me, family means my parents, my brother, and my cat. To you, it might mean your parents, your grandparents, and your siblings. So it doesn't really come as a surprise when we say that even during the Vedic age, families existed. So now let's take a look at the Vedic age families. Well, during the early Vedic period, the smallest social unit was family, also known as Kula, and these were patriarchal, so they were headed by the eldest male member of the family, and they were known as Kulapati or Grihapati. So if the father was the oldest male member of the family, he would be the Kulapati. If you were an elder male boy in the early Vedic age, then you will soon be the Kulapati or the Grihapati as well. But does that mean that women were treated badly during the early Vedic age? Well, no. Women were not treated badly, even women were treated as equals as the men. They were allowed to attend religious and political functions and were also allowed to select their own husbands in a practice of Swayamvara. Apart from that, there were many famous women scholars from that period. For example, Rishika Gargi, who in this illustration can be seen in an important debate, philosophical debate with Rishi Yajnavalkya. In fact, some important women scholars such as Gargi and Maitri even contributed hymns to the Rig Veda. So we can understand that women were really respected during the early Vedic period. In fact, evil practices such as child marriages and the practice of sati, in which the widow has to burn herself along with the funeral fire of her late husband, was not present during the early Vedic society. In fact, society accepted widow remarriage during the early Vedic age. Now imagine you get a hold of a time machine and you decide to go to the early Vedic age. What will you wear? Will you wear a t-shirt and jeans? It will be this easy to figure out that you're not from that generation. So you must dress up in a dhoti or navy for your lower half and a shirt called vasa along with a turban and an overgarment called adhivasa. So this was like a cloak. Take a look at this illustration here. These can be figured out by looking at this sculpture. So here we can see the man wearing a turban in both these pictures, and they are also wearing dhotis, which people even in this day and age wear in India. Along with that, they have also covered themselves in such adhivasas. But is that all? Well, their clothes were colorfully dyed, as you can see from this picture, and they were usually made of cotton, wool and silk, or they were even made of deer skin or mritchal, which was usually worn by ascetics. These were people, rishis and sages, who had given up on their worldly life and retired to the forest in the name of God. But is that all? Don't you think these people wore jewelry? Well, they did wear ornaments made of gold, silver, ivory and other precious stones, such as the ones that you can see in these pictures here. And not only women, in fact, men also wore such ornaments, and these were usually in the form of bracelets, necklaces, anklets and rings. So, doesn't that sound really fascinating? After this, you might want to enjoy yourself, but what will you do for recreation? I'm sure during the early Vedic age there wasn't cricket or PUBG, right? So the people during the early Vedic age used to participate in activities such as chariot races, horse races, hunting and even gambling was prevalent during the early Vedic age. However, you must not take part in it as it was not viewed in a positive light. Apart from that, the people in the early Vedic age also enjoyed music. They had instruments such as flute, ravanhatha and even drums. So you might as well have a small little early Vedic party for yourself. So now let's try to find out what these people ate. So cows during the early Vedic age acted as a symbol of strength and they were really important in that society. And these people were cattle rearing people. That was their main occupation, right? So what do cattle produce? Well, they give us milk. So we find out that during the early Vedic age, people used to eat a lot of milk products such as butter, ghee and curd. However, they also used to grow barley or yava. But they also enjoyed themselves during festivals and ritual ceremonies by drinking intoxicating drink called soma, and it is said that Lord Indra was really big fan of it. Now, if you have spent so much time in the early Vedic age, you might have realized that these people had a Varna system. So this system was based on people's color. But we find out that during the early Vedic period, this Varna system was very flexible. This was divided into 4 different Varnas: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. So now let's find out more about them. Well, firstly, the Brahmins were the priests who were conducting rituals and sacrifices. That is why they were considered so important. And the people on top of this pyramid much more important than compared to the people belonging at the end of this pyramid. Next we have the Kshatriyas. These included the kings and warriors who had the important task of protecting the society from enemies. So because their task or role in the society was so important, they were very well respected. Next we have the Vaishyas, and these included the common people such as the farmers, traders and craftsmen. Lastly we have the Shudras. So when the Aryans came into the Indian territories, they saw that people were already living here. They named these people Dasas, who were dark skinned, whereas the Aryans were fair skinned, right? So they started discriminating against these Dasas based just on skin color, and this is how the Varna system came into existence. The Shudras included Dasas and criminal Aryans who were considered absolutely useless, only useful to serve the other 3 classes. We get to know so much about the Varna system because of the Purusha Sukta. Right? This is why we know so much about the Varna system. And what is Purusha Sukta? Well, it is a very important Rigvedic hymn. And it is because of this that we know so much about this Vedic age. However, during the early Vedic age, this Varna system was not really rigid. In fact, a person belonging in one Varna could still change their Varna and become a part of a different Varna by changing their profession or their function in the society, right? So with that we can understand that there was mobility allowed during the early Vedic age, right? And as we found out that this wasn't really rigid, the people of different Aryan social backgrounds mingled with each other. And in fact, there was also the concept that a person from one Varna could even share food cooked by the other, and they also practiced intercaste marriages as well. So we can finally completely understand that this system of Varna system was really flexible and not really rigid during the early Vedic age. Well, things take a wrong turn in the later Vedic age, because in the later Vedic age what happens is that this Varna system transitions into the caste system, which you can see here. And in this system the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas become more powerful. Why? Well, because the kings had to take part in rituals, and who would conduct such rituals? Well, the Brahmins would conduct expensive and ridiculously complex rituals, right? And because of this, the Brahmins also get richer. Apart from that, there was also the concept of Anuloma unions, in which a man belonging to a higher class marries a woman from a lower class. So a Brahman or a Kshatriya could easily marry a woman belonging to Vaishya or Shudra community. However, when this was allowed, Pratiloma unions were not really allowed, which is basically when a woman from the higher class would marry a man from these lower classes. So we find out that Pratiloma unions were not allowed, even though Anuloma unions were allowed. And the caste system of later Vedic period became rigid and oppressive, and because of this one could no longer change their caste. So mobility in the later Vedic system was not really allowed anymore. Along with that, positive features of the society that we found in the early Vedic age, such as intercaste marriages, intercaste dining, also disappeared. And new evil practices such as the practice of sati and child marriages came into existence. So during the later Vedic age, the importance of women in the society decreased and they were now considered inferior to men. In fact, they were no longer even allowed to attend religious and political functions, and they could not even select their own husbands like they were allowed previously, right? Apart from that, woman or girl child was considered a burden, and in the Vedas we can find many rituals and mantras to be read for the birth of a boy. So with that we can understand that all the positive features of the society and the importance of women had vanished in the later Vedic society. After that, we come to the point that in the later Vedic period, rituals and sacrifices became more complex as the priests became very greedy. You see, the priests realized and they later convinced the common people that if they don't conduct such expensive and lavish rituals, that the gods would not be happy. So, keeping the Brahmins happy was an important part of the later Vedic society. Apart from that, a bitter rivalry developed between the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. So why did this happen? Well, because the Brahman priests, which you can even see here, were conducting expensive rituals, they were now financially rich, and the Kshatriya kings were not really happy about this. And because of all of this, the importance of Brahmins also increased in the society. However, even though there was a rivalry between these two classes, what happened is that they compromised because they wanted to further exploit the other two classes. So, these two higher classes jointly exploited the lower two castes. So, now in the later Vedic age, we see the development of the 4 ashrams, which was basically a way to live an ideal life for the later Vedic people. So, let's take a look at all of these 4 stages. The first stage was the Brahmacharya stage, which started at the age of 14 and stayed till the age of 25. In this, you have to be a student and learn everything there is to learn about the Vedas. And the next stage is the Grihastha stage, which starts from the age of 25 and stays till the age of 48. And in this stage, you have to lead a married life and have a family. The next stage is the Vanaprastha stage, which was really difficult because it was from the age of 48 to 72, in which you have to leave your family and go into the forest to meditate and slowly loosen ties with your loved ones. Well, if you find the Vanaprastha stage to be difficult, you'd be really surprised at what comes next. Next is the Sannyasa stage, which you can take part in after the age of 72. And in this stage, you have to give up everything and retire permanently into the forest in the name of God. This was the ideal way to lead a life. However, what usually used to happen is that people usually used to quit at this Grihastha stage. So this only shows us how difficult it is to lead an ideal life. Today, we have our own system of education, right? We all go to schools, attend various different classes or lectures, and then come back to our houses or go back to our hostels, right? So even during the later Vedic period, these people had their own system of education. This was the Gurukul system of education. Guru meaning teacher and Kul meaning family. So you had to receive education while staying at the house of the Guru or the teacher as part of their family, right? So while the women of that period could attain this knowledge from staying at their houses, the boys after the age of 14 had to have a thread ceremony, also known as Upanayana. Upanayana or the thread ceremony, after which they had to go and live with their teacher, right? So they had to sleep and then wake up and then live a life of discipline while they were staying at the house of their teacher, right? They had subjects such as literature, mathematics, grammar, architecture, astronomy, music, medicine, and the art of warfare and fighting. Even in this picture here, you can see people fighting in the background. So all of these were taught in these Gurukul schools, right? So what happened? Well, the main thing was the knowledge of the Vedas. So the Vedas were really taught during this stage. And after the education was complete, the students had to give the Guru a Guru Dakshina or a gift to show their gratitude towards the teacher teaching them. The Vedic system of mathematics was so simple that even today people are following those same techniques. Let us now try to solve this problem here. This looks like a very difficult sum and you should probably use a calculator, right? Well, by trying the Vedic method, you'd be surprised to see how easy this sum truly is. First, you have to write down each digit one by one like this. Right? So after writing these in this form, you have to divide each digit by 2. So 8 divided by 2 will become 4. So similarly, do the rest and then put a 0 at the end. And that's it. That's your final answer. So don't you think this method is really surprisingly easy? Well, let's now try to solve a different sum. Here you can see that when you try to divide 3, you will not get a whole number, right? So what do you do next? Well, you have to put the extra value in the tens digit of the next number. So now this 8 will become 18 and you will have to divide it by 2, which will be 9, right? So similarly, you will get this answer 31930, and that is your final answer. So don't you think the Vedic method of doing mathematics was much more simpler? So now that we have learnt about the early Vedic society and the later Vedic society, let's take a look at some of the most important changes that took place between these societies. Well, the first thing we see is that women were treated as equals as the men in the early Vedic society, whereas this thing changed, and now in the later Vedic society, women were treated as inferior to men. So they were no longer equals. Apart from that, evil practices such as child marriages and sati were not prevalent during the early Vedic age, which came into existence during the later Vedic age, right? So evil practices such as sati and child marriages came into existence in this later Vedic society. After this, we see that in the early Vedic society, widow remarriage was accepted, whereas in the later Vedic age, this was no longer accepted. In fact, widows were supposed to take part in sati, right? So widow remarriage was no longer allowed in the later Vedic period. Also see that during the early Vedic society, there were simpler rituals as compared to the later Vedic society, when expensive and complex rituals dominated the lives of people, and because of this, the importance of Brahmins rose in the society, right? Lastly, we find that during the early Vedic society, a new system was created, which was the Varna system, and it divided people into 4 new classes: the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. However, this was based on their occupation, and a person could easily change their occupation or change their Varna, and therefore this system was very much flexible and there was mobility allowed in this system, right? However, we find out that in the later Vedic society, the caste system came up, which was similar. However, it was much more rigid and oppressive. So it wasn't flexible at all, and one could not simply change their caste. In fact, this was based on heredity. So overall, we find that the early Vedic society was very happy and healthy, and the later Vedic society was really not. So if the early Vedic society was like a dream, the later Vedic society comes out as a nightmare. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free on DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app and get easy access to more than 5,000 amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million+ questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and get a chance to win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.